Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope you're all doing good today. So, we've got something really cool to talk about if you're a Mass Effect fan, especially if you're one of those people who just can't let go of the Legendary Edition. You know that feeling when you think you've seen everything this game has to offer, and then out of nowhere, the community comes through again with another massive update? Yeah, that's what happened here. The Mass Effect Legendary Edition community patch just got a brand new release, version 1.8, and it's honestly one of those updates that makes you appreciate how dedicated and detail obsessed this community still is, even years after release. So let's talk about what's actually going on here. This isn't just a random mod with flashy visuals or gameplay changes. It's a carefully built, deeply technical fix pack that smooths out things BioWare never got around to polishing. Think of it as the definitive way to play Mass Effect 1 in 2025 if you're sticking with the Legendary Edition. And before you ask, yes, this is the same team of modders who've been putting out these updates over time, gradually restoring cut content, patching up old bugs, and making the whole thing feel just a little more alive and authentic to what the original developers probably wanted it to be. The first thing that really stands out with this patch is just how refined it is. You can tell it's built for people who already love the game inside and out. It's not throwing huge overhauls at you. It's more like someone quietly walking behind you, fixing things you didn't even realize were broken. You know, those tiny visual glitches, weird animation hiccups, or those moments where the dialogue just doesn't quite line up with the character's mouth? Those are the kinds of things this patch focuses on. But there's also a lot more going on under the hood, especially in terms of world consistency and restored content. Right away, one of the big requirements you'll notice is that it now depends on ME3 Tweaks Mod Manager version 9 or higher. That's the modern framework the modding scene has shifted to. It handles merging game files more efficiently and helps avoid a lot of the older compatibility issues. So if you haven't updated your mod manager yet, you'll want to do that first before applying this patch. The process itself is easy enough. You download the mod, drag it into ME3 Tweaks, and just apply it to your LE1 installation. It's designed to be painless, which is great because the modders know that most of us just want to get back to playing, not fiddling with settings all afternoon. Now, let's talk about the good stuff, the actual changes and improvements that make this patch worth downloading. One of the immediate quality of life fixes that stands out is how it improves small but noticeable gameplay quirks. For example, the jogging and walking toggle used to feel inconsistent, sometimes just refusing to respond properly when you switched between them. That's been fixed. Another subtle but really nice touch is the sniper zoom sensitivity. If you ever felt like the camera got a little too twitchy or inconsistent while zoomed in, that's been cleaned up. It's one of those things you probably got used to over time and just accepted, but now when you play with the fix, you'll wonder how you ever tolerated it before. There's also a fix for the splash screen volume, which used to spike randomly if you had your game audio turned down. Now, it behaves consistently. The mod team even touched up the mod settings menus. If you've got other mods installed that add configuration screens, you might have noticed how cluttered or oversized some of those menus looked. That's all been refined for better usability. But what I think is really special about this update isn't just the technical cleanup. It's the subtle restoration of little pieces of story and character interaction that make Mass Effect feel like a living universe again. They went in and restored a few bits of dialogue and scenes that were in the game files, but never actually triggered during normal gameplay. Dr. Chakwas, for example, now has some additional lines that were supposed to play on the Normandy, giving her just a bit more personality and presence. It's not huge. It's not like they added a new mission, but it's those tiny details that make the Normandy feel more like a real ship full of people rather than a static hub. They also restored a Wrex line that happens after the Vermeer mission, one of those emotionally charged points where every little bit of dialogue counts. Having that extra line back in the game adds a touch of authenticity to his character arc, and it feels like something that should have been there all along. The patch even gives Bane's blackmailer a unique face now. If you remember that obscure side story, it used to feel a bit generic because the NPC was just another faceless character. Now he stands out, and while it's a small change, it adds personality and helps the lore feel more connected. And speaking of missions, they even restored squad mate Barks for the X-57 asteroid DLC, the Bring Down the Sky mission. That one always felt a bit bare bones compared to the rest of the game, and now it has more life to it, thanks to the additional squad mate commentary that was buried in the files. These are the types of touches that make replaying a game feel fresh again, even if you've done it a dozen times. Then we've got the visual tweaks. Kaidan's hair mesh was fixed, something fans have been asking about for a while. If you noticed his hair behaving strangely under certain lighting conditions or angles, that's finally been addressed. Ashley's visor during the full breather scenes has been corrected too, And there was even a material fix for the Rosenkopf-Karpov pistol, so it looks more consistent with the rest of the weapons in the game. None of these are massive overhauls, but when you add them all together, they polish the game to a level that BioWare probably would have delivered if they had another 6 months of QA time back in 2021. One of the really impressive parts of this patch is how much attention was given to the environments. They went back through almost every major area: Eden Prime, Pharos, Noveria, Vermeer, the Normandy, and even random uncharted worlds, and addressed dozens of small but immersion-breaking issues. We're talking floating grass, weird geometry, AI behavior that didn't trigger correctly, and even a few soft lock situations that could completely halt progress if you weren't careful. For example, there was a notorious bug during the Vermeer bomb run where the game could soft lock under certain conditions. That's been fixed now. They even touched up some AI stalls in the Citadel lower markets where enemies would just freeze mid-combat. Those things might not sound flashy, but they drastically improve the smoothness of a full playthrough. And that's kind of the beauty of this whole project. It's not about flashy additions, it's about cohesion. When you play through Mass Effect 1 now with this patch installed, it feels more complete. It feels like all the little rough edges have been smoothed over, and the world just responds to you in a way that makes sense. Even small changes like fixing animation transitions or realigning a character's posture during dialogue scenes contribute to that feeling of refinement. It's also worth noting that the mod team themselves have mentioned that this is the last major patch before they move toward what they're calling a 2.0 version. That next step will apparently involve a new framework and potentially even more restoration work, but for now, this release is about closing the book on the 1.x era of the community patch. You can tell they put a lot of love into making this one feel stable and final. So if you're planning a new playthrough anytime soon, this is definitely worth installing. Just make sure you follow the right installation steps. Update ME3 Tweaks Mod Manager to version 9 or higher, import the mod, and apply it directly to your LE1 installation. If you're upgrading from version 1.7.2, you can install this one right over it, without having to completely start from scratch. That said, if you're using texture mods or anything that replaces major game files, it's always best to restore your backup first, and then reapply those after installing the patch. That'll save you from any weird conflicts. From a player's perspective, this update really highlights just how passionate the Mass Effect modding community still is. Most studios move on after a game launches, but this fan base just keeps refining it, not because they have to, but because they care. They want the experience to be as perfect as possible, to feel like the definitive version of the story that shaped so many players' love for sci-fi RPGs. And honestly, that's what's so inspiring about this. When you play with the patch installed, it doesn't feel like some fan mod bolted onto the game. It feels official. It feels like it was always meant to be that way. That's the real power of a well-crafted community patch. It doesn't call attention to itself. It just quietly enhances everything. If you've ever been on the fence about replaying Mass Effect 1 because you remembered all those little bugs and oddities that could pull you out of the experience, this is your green light. You can go back, start a new career as Shepard, and feel like the game's running smoother and more polished than ever before. The pacing, the atmosphere, the character interactions, all of it benefits from these subtle changes. It's like someone tuned up the engine on a classic car you already loved, and now it just runs better. And honestly, it's kind of wild to think about how far the modding scene has come for this series. Back in the early days of the original trilogy, modding was clunky and limited, but with tools like ME3 tweaks and dedicated community work, the Legendary Edition has basically turned into a living platform. Between this patch, texture overhauls, expanded romance restorations, and even full-scale narrative mods in development, the game has a longer life now than anyone probably expected. So, yeah, if you've been waiting for an excuse to return to the Normandy, this is it. Whether you're a purist who just wants the cleanest, most stable version of the game, or someone layering this on top of a modded playthrough with visual enhancements, it's worth having. Version 1.8 really feel like the definitive cleanup of everything that was still lingering after all the previous updates. The best part is how invisible it feels in practice. You don't boot it up and suddenly notice wild changes. You just notice that everything feels right. That's how you know it's working. No more weird stutters during dialogue, no missing voice lines, no random enemies stuck in idle animations, no graphical oddities that pull you out of the story. It's subtle, elegant, and deeply respectful of the source material. At the end of the day, that's what makes this so special. It's not about reinventing Mass Effect, it's about perfecting it. It's about taking a game that's already beloved and giving it that final coat of polish it always deserved. And if you ask me, that's something worth celebrating. So if you're gearing up for another run through the stars with Shepard and the crew, make sure you grab this patch before you start. It's easy to install, it plays nicely with most other mods, and it just makes the whole experience smoother. It's the kind of update that reminds you why the community around this series is so strong. It's made by fans who genuinely love it and want to see it at its best. That's all for now, but if you're planning to test it out or already have it running, let me know what your experience has been like. Have you noticed the new lines? Did any of the fixes surprise you? I'm genuinely curious how it feels for other players because every time I go back to LE1, it hits differently, and patches like this just keep it feeling fresh. Anyway, thanks for hanging out, and I'll catch you in the next one.